Hi there, thanks everybody. Thanks for at home in Highlands for welcoming me here today. So I'm going to do a short presentation today focusing on backyard housing or garden suites. There'll be a little bit of technical stuff on what exactly you can do in your own backyard. It's not advertised well or sort of common knowledge. And recently, Edmonton has made major changes to our zoning bylaws as of January 1st. So we'll get into that. And I'm also going to talk about why in our current city, we have an unprecedented opportunity to rebuild our city again with backyard housing, and essentially we don't want to screw it up this time. So we're encouraging anyone to build a backyard house to build it an accessible backyard house, and I'll get into what that means and why that's a better investment than not building accessible. But first I just want to talk about a lovely woman I met named Kendra. So Kendra, when she was 27 years old, she was skiing downhill. She went off the run and hit a tree, and she was paralyzed from the waist down. So you can imagine at 27 years old how life-changing that would be. So after coming out of the hospital, somebody like that, what choices do you have? So Kendra was actually lucky in that her parents were able to renovate a portion of her house, and 5 years later, she still lives there. So they were able to basically create a space for her in their own place. So she's 32 years old right now. She works full-time for Spinal Cord Injury Alberta, but still she has nowhere to go. Like I said, a highly successful woman. So what does the future look like for her? There really are no options. And another fellow that I've met just recently who we're going to be working with, his name's Al, 65 years old. During this winter, Al slipped and fell on his deck and injured his spine, and he's now paralyzed from the waist down. And he's at the Glenrose Hospital currently. So Al lives in a bi-level, and you look at something like that, and it's very difficult to renovate. But the Glenrose won't release him from the hospital because he can't live independently at home, obviously without a major renovation. I had the privilege of meeting Al, and we're actually going to be building Al, or we've already started building Al a place in the backyard. So for a very similar price to a renovation of that scale, he's able to build a fully accessible home in his backyard instead. But still, in the meantime, he's still at the Glenrose, right? So a backyard build, depending on the size, can be 4 to 6 months. But Al doesn't need to be at the Glenrose. So there's also a major need and a major opportunity for short-term rentals in accessible housing. Like I said, the Glenrose Foundation, WCB, there's many not-for-profits that are looking for short-term, 3-month, 6-month, 1 year stays while someone's main dwelling is retrofitted. Again, something that we believe landlords can take advantage of. Okay, so let's get into it, and we can do some questions at the end. So what's a garden suite? So it's all kind of new as far as backyard housing, and you hear me call it backyard housing. Each municipality has sort of their own set of rules. Obviously, I'm focused on Edmonton today, but in those set of rules, there's zoning bylaws. They'll actually define garden suite or backyard housing by different names. So there's laneway homes, granny flats is kind of the slang. Accessory dwelling units is common, and backyard housing. So in Edmonton, the actual technical term is backyard housing, but most people don't know what you mean, so they end up saying garden suites. So now I kind of flop back and forth, so just be prepared for that. So why do we like backyard housing? Well, there's so many different uses. Obviously, like I said, this is more of an investment-focused presentation, but they're really great for multi-generational living. Parents in the back, kids in the front, or vice versa. Kids in the back, parents in the front, or grandparents, right? And of course, helping with a mortgage as far as making passive income, utilizing that space that you have on your lot already. And then also, they can provide a really great affordable house, and of course, we're a big proponent of inclusive design. So how do I know if my property is zoned for a garden suite? So pre-January 1st, this was actually a question. In Edmonton, post January 1st, 2024, It isn't anymore, so it is. So all small scale residential zones, which is essentially all residential in Edmonton, we're all zoned the same now. We used to have, 10 or 12 different zones, and it was all sort of dependent on that. That's all been wiped away. It's all one brush now. So we're all considered zone RS, and so there is no, what I'm saying today would work no matter your neighborhood. So why do we like the garden suite as an investment? It can add a lot of value to your property. Because it's so new, there's not a lot of data on exactly how much, but we're expecting somewhere between 80 cents to a full recoup of your money. So after you build it and resell, or after you build it and appraise your property, somewhere around 80 cents on the dollar, better than a basement suite or most renovations. And of course, you can make passive income with a low risk investment. And today we're going to be talking about how you can maximize that investment with a conclusive or accessible design. So we'll just get into some of the rules. This garden suites in general could probably be a full day conference sort of thing. So we're just going to go over it quick, so you can kind of get an idea. It's like a renovation in that every situation is different. Every property is different, as you'll see. So our maximum building height is 23.3 feet, down from 28 for your main residence. So they do want it to be lower than the main dwelling. So a backyard house is entirely possible for, even if you don't have a laneway. A lot of people believe that you need an alley. You do not. So any home in Edmonton can have a backyard house. It's just that if you do not have an alley, you're limited to 1 story. Unless you're back onto a green space, and then 2 stories is permitted once again. So the entire planning process now is based on lot coverage, lot size and lot coverage. There used to be very specific guidelines. A backyard house could only be so big, max. It was very sort of prescripted. Now it's like I said, every situation is different. It's dependent on your lot. So in general, you're allowed a total site coverage of 45%. Like I said, all RS zoning. So what that means is anything with a roof is considered part of your site coverage, and it's the footprint itself. So if you have a 2-story home, you're not counting the second floor, you're just counting the footprint itself that you're taking up on the property. So when we look at your property, we say how big is the main dwelling and how much are we taking up of the lot already. And you can use up to a maximum of 20% of that footprint for a garden suite. You don't have to use 20%, but you have that allowance. But Edmonton does cap the second story. So if you are doing a second story, you can't go above 647 square feet. So that's a hard rule. So I think they just don't want to see these kind of big rectangle sort of barn looking things. So yeah, but that doesn't include like a balcony or an outdoor space on the second floor. So you can have a very big footprint as far as the main floor, and your second floor, you're going to be maxed out at this amount. So what are the things to be considered when we're figuring out what you can do for a backyard suite? There's something called setbacks. So setbacks are basically an area where you're not allowed to build in on your property. So for example, we have rear and side setbacks, both being 4 feet. So you have to be at least 4 feet in from the alley and at least 4 feet over from either property line. And you have to be a minimum of 10 feet away from the main dwelling, which isn't a lot, but so you can come up as close to 10 feet from your existing home. We also have something that's called the 50% lot line. So that basically means the backyard house has to be in the backyard. So they take the line that's 50% of your property, and you can't encroach on that. So we're looking at, like I said, our setbacks in the rear, the sides, and this 50% line, and also where the main house is placed, and trying to figure out essentially what's called your build pocket. So that's a term we use in construction, build pocket. This is an area, a buildable area. So like I said, every property is different. It's based on how big your main house is, how wide, etc. your property, right? So it's something that's easily figured out, but just we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. The build pocket doesn't mean you have to fill that area. It's just where you can build. So you can, place a building. So if you have a building that's 25% of your build pocket, you can move it around. How big do you want your driveway, et cetera, et cetera. So and the bigger the lot, generally the bigger the build pocket. So what does all that mean? Sort of throwing a lot of numbers at you at once. So this is just a real quick scenario. So if you have a 50 by 100 lot in meters, everything's done in meters for lot size. 50 by 100 lot, we have a 500 square meter total lot, and call it a 140 square meter house. And so currently we're taking up 28% of the property. So that means we have 17% available for a garden suite, or a footprint of 914 square feet. So that's simple, like I said, but there's obviously still some more to figure out with setbacks and that sort of thing. But on a base level, this can tell you how much remaining amount you have for a new structure. So what does 914 square feet look like? Hard to picture. So this is an example of a 2-story backyard house. It does have the 2-car garage. We just have a hobby space sort of on the main floor, but you could also have a bedroom or a bathroom here. Again, there's so many different options. You could have a 1-car garage and have much more living space, but ultimately you have this footprint to do with what you like. In this unit, we show an elevator because, again, we believe in accessibility. So we have 440 square feet for the garage and 474 to give us our 914. So that's what a main floor could be. And then the second floor, so this is a 1-bedroom unit, has a nice sun deck, kitchen, again with the elevator. And these circles shown are what's called 5-foot turning radiuses for accessibility. They're not drawn on the floor in reality. It's just a little bit more space. And this is our 647 max. So essentially a design like this with a 914 square foot footprint ends up being 1,121 livable square feet plus a 2-car garage. So these are just some renderings of what a garden suite can look like. It can be a really beautiful home, right? So we're not building, something that just looks like a loft over the garage. These are homes, and a lot of times you can take the property and flip it around, and you wouldn't know which is which, right? And again, from the accessibility standpoint, these units are both fully accessible for persons with mobility challenges, and you would never notice the difference. There's no ramps on the outside or anything, or lifts. We do level entry, so you also notice, for this one, for example, there's no steps. So the whole idea is to ensure that you make passive income. So again, we have the ability to rebuild our city one backyard at a time, but we want it to be a very good investment to go inclusive. And how do we ensure that you make money other than just setting up the financials is mitigating risk. So I'm here today representing the No Limits Collective. It's a program designed to do just that, to mitigate risks for landlords. And the risks we're talking about are maintenance and sort of surprise costs, vacancy and dead time for your unit where you're not collecting income, and of course finding a tenant. So the No Limits Collective, any inclusive design qualifies. I'll go over that shortly, what that means. But basically, if you were interested in this program, the No Limits Collective would sign a lease with you at the same time you sign a build contract, essentially ensuring you have a rent, fair market rent, for that first year guaranteed right from day one. There's no maintenance fees for 3 years. All the buildings, every new build has a full inclusive warranty for 3 years. And there's short-term and rental leases available, so it becomes an insurance plan for your backyard house. And this costs you nothing, so there's no annual fees, no monthly fees. So essentially it's a property management program that you can choose to use or not use, right? It's like I said, if you want just help finding a tenant, but you don't want the No Limits Collective to field the calls from the tenant, that's fine. Ultimately, it's just a program designed to encourage that unit to be inclusive as opposed to not. We're just going to briefly talk on construction. How are we building these units in backyards? So in general, they don't have basements. So if we're talking about a return on investment, in sort of bang for your buck. A basement fully finished compared to the amount of rent you're going to receive from that, it generally just doesn't make sense. The units are too small. And also with height restrictions that we have, putting in the basement and raising the building up makes it very difficult to get a decent ceiling height. So unless it's, like I said, for yourself and your own use, and that's something you prefer, from an investment perspective, basements are not something we're recommending. So what we're doing is it's what's called slab on grade, and it has screw piles. So like that 914 square foot house that I mentioned could have up to 32 screw piles, probably would, something like that. These screw piles go down anywhere from 10 feet to 25 feet. The engineering itself is far superior to a basement, so we talk about, again, maintenance. Each pile is engineered, each pile is inspected. The proof of assurances is much higher than a basement development. So a house built like this will not move. Again, so you don't have settling or moving from season to season, less maintenance costs, less upkeep. So really, when we talk about assurances and risk, the biggest thing, of course, is the tenant, right? So this is the guy that's calling about a leaky faucet right now, right? And that's generally the biggest barrier for most people getting into being a landlord is how do I find the right tenant? So this is Kendra. Like I said, I introduced her briefly in the beginning, the woman who was paralyzed while skiing. So the program is designed to find persons like Kendra that can really benefit from inclusive housing. So the No Limits Collective is essentially trying to link up nice folks like yourselves who are looking to make some passive income with the organizations and not-for-profits who are working with Kendra and people like her, because there is such a need for inclusive housing. So the demand is there, but the supply is not. This is a really great time to build and get into these lower risk investments. Someone like Kendra is a person who is we would call a lower risk tenant, and that she would be extremely grateful for this type of place. We get calls from persons that are willing to move across the province for a home like this. The product just doesn't exist, and the need is so high and continuing to grow. And then, of course, so it's not just persons with a spinal cord injury, it's obviously seniors, and senior housing is top of mind. So there's something that we call the societal funnel that's sort of in plain sight, but no one talks about. And this is where all persons and all seniors are eventually funneled into some sort of communal long-term care. We have a stat from ASHA, Alberta Seniors Housing Association, that says only 10% of all seniors voluntarily go into this type of housing. The rest are pushed there in what we call the societal funnel, where essentially their home or your home becomes non-functional. So again, the backyard housing can be a great resource for seniors housing, seniors looking to downsize, especially snowbirds, all that sort of thing. Again, going back to that low risk tenant model, especially on one bedroom units. So here's the big picture. So we have the property owner like yourselves, the builder, there's Red Plaid Developments, Metro is here as well, and ModWorks is also a partner of the No Limits Collective. We have the program coordinator, that's of course the No Limits Collective. And like I said, we're grouping the builders, the investor, with the tenant placement partners. Currently we're endorsed by Voices for Albertans with Disabilities, that's the purple hand, Spinal Cord Injury Alberta, and ASHA, Alberta Seniors Housing Association. But we're also in talks with WCB and the Glen Rose Foundation as well currently. So the whole thing together, we believe, is an innovative, accessible housing solution. Like I said, this is not a charity. This is based on the property owner, the original property owner, making a profit. So, about 100 times I've said accessibility and inclusive design. I've used them sort of interchangeably, but what does it actually mean? So this is still kind of a gray area, but luckily enough, Edmonton does define it in their bylaws. So there are I think 5 things. So the first being level entry to home, so no steps. Ramps are technically allowed, but we don't believe in ramps, so no steps, level entry to all entrances. So no steps from your garage into the house, the back door, the front door, etc. Right? So you need a minimum hallways width of 43, which is just great for everybody. 36-inch wide doorways, again, not a big deal. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, is in the 2-story. Of course, then we need an elevator or a lift if it is a 2-story unit to be considered accessible. 1 barrier-free washroom, and then all different areas have a minimum turning circle. Those are those circles that I was showing you on our floor plans. That would basically allow someone with a wheelchair or even a walker, anything like that, just space to move around without bumping into things, right? So that's it. So technically with these items, you're considered accessible. So a lot of times we talk accessible, people automatically picture more of a hospital setting, lowered counters, space under sinks. All that is great, of course, but that's not in our definition. So you can choose to do that, or you could choose not to do that, right? So there's full barrier-free wheelchair accessible, and then there's inclusive and accessible. So at the bare minimum, this is what we're hoping to achieve with sort of our second city that we're about to build. So Edmonton does actually, so they've defined inclusive, but the reason why they defined it is so that they can provide a very small benefit. So there is a small benefit with the city. Basically, they give you an extra 2%. So we talked about that 45% max on your property. If you meet the definition of inclusivity, you get an extra 2%. Not amazing. That's why the No Limits Collective is here to provide more incentives than something like that. So basically, in our example, we had 17% available. Now we have 19%. It's an additional 107 square feet. And they also bump up the maximum second floor. So we said 647 was your maximum. If you meet the definition of inclusive, they give you an extra 150 square feet there, so 754. So my first example was 1121 was our square feet. I should probably work on getting these into round numbers. But 1335 would be the new with the city. Again, not the best benefit. We hope obviously over time that the city would step up a little bit more, but again, we still believe that building accessible is a much better investment than not, mainly because of the supports, the tenant pool you would access, the supports and free property management you can access, and the community's all involved in supporting that tenant. So what does inclusive design look like? Like I said, it doesn't, everybody pictures a hospital setting, sort of white, stark, but it doesn't. So this is an inclusive unit. We built in Stony Plain. This is showing the elevator here. So the living space, it is a 2-story. The living space is on the second floor. So this is the elevator here, kind of hiding in plain sight. This is an inclusive bathroom. It's just missing the grab bar by the toilet, but just because the client didn't want it, but it has 0 threshold shower, so it's easy in, easy out, no door or any kind of barrier there. It does have a 5-foot turning radius in the middle. And again, this is an inclusive build. So it's things you can't really see. The hallways are wider, all the doors are 3 feet. That's the elevator there. So the island you can't see from this angle, but the island is a little bit farther away from the cabinets. So inclusive can be just as beautiful, right? The whole idea is when people walk through your suite and you tell them it's accessible, they would be surprised. It can be very, sort of uninvasive and beautiful. So this is just a rendering of what a studio apartment could look like. There's the ability to go as small as 480 square feet for a accessible unit. So that's what this is showing here. Again, it's as if you were buying a condo, right? So if you're looking at a condo for investment, we believe this is much better in that it's not a condo, right? You don't have to worry about all the condo fees and different things, and you can get a very similar rental amount or more. So what's the very first step if you're interested in something like this? Really, it's like I said, a case-by-case basis. So why are you here? It could be building a unit for a family member. It could be an investment or it could be both, right? So we work with persons who are building an accessible unit for themselves, but they don't need it yet, or a parent, but they don't need it yet. Well, we still would encourage you to build that now because of the short-term major need with these different organizations. So we have the ability to go 1 year at a time, and then when you say, yes, I want that unit now for my own personal use, you have it. So it can be a really great insurance plan for families and make passive income in the meantime and do a lot of good in the community. So, this is just a bunch of jumble, but basically this is everything we're doing to look at your property, right? This is what I was talking about. We have our build pocket down here. We're looking at all the different, and we issue this to you to show what you can and can't do with options in summary. So again, I'm a firm believer in building backyard homes to address our housing shortage. There's tens of thousands of homes in Edmonton alone that qualify. Like I said, a once in a generation or once ever in a city's life to do a do-over. But every time we don't make that unit at least a bare amount of inclusive, it never will be. So we're, like I said, advocating for persons to help sort of all come together as a community. 27% of Canadians age 15 and over, so 8 million people in Canada have specified that they have at least one disability. That percentage is the same in Alberta as far as percentage of population. So again, a non-accessible unit, you're accessing 75%. So the biggest thing people say is that I don't want to build accessible, I don't want my unit to be niche, right? So I don't want it to be niche, I'm restricting people. Well, it's quite the opposite. By building inclusive, you're including everyone, right? So by building non-accessible, you're potentially excluding 27% of the Alberta population. Build inclusive, anybody can use it, right? So now you're accessing 100% of the population. And we truly believe that 27% is more the low risk type tenant that you're looking for. In the end, like I said, it's not a charity, it's about helping the investor make money. And so it is a case-by-case on that. How are you financing the build? What are your carrying costs? In the end, we're not expecting anyone to rent below fair market value. If you want to, of course, go ahead. But we want to ensure that you make money, tell your friends, and we keep encouraging this type of house for our new infrastructure. So there's a cross-section of Edmonton, so we can build them here, everywhere. So thanks so much for attending. This is our website, nolimitscollective.com. There's a video there that just sort of explains everything I did a little bit. It is, like I said, a newer program, but we're hoping to make a change for the better. Have I got time for questions?
Oh, of course. Thank you, Adam.
So I got 5 or 6 just frequently asked questions. I'll just shoot through them quick.
Yeah.
So can you divide a garden suite? Subdivide, right? So people subdivide their lots down the middle, say a 50-foot wide becomes 2 25-foot lots. Can you subdivide front to back? No, you can't. Under no circumstances. Well, do I think this will change in the future? Yeah, I hope it does, to be honest. That can really make a dent in affordable housing by dividing a property in 2. But right now, no, you cannot. Does the 2-story garden suite have to have an elevator to be inclusive? The answer is yes. But it can also be a stair lift. Obviously, it's just some sort of mechanical operation to move from one floor to the other. Do we have to remove our current garage? It depends. So if you're building where the garage is, so everybody thinks a garden suite, and I don't blame anyone for thinking this, but a garden suite, you think I'm just going to put a suite above my garage. It's not nearly that simple, right? So our garages are not built to support a dwelling. The engineering in the building code is quite different to build a garage as opposed to a dwelling unit. So 99 times out of 100, if you're building onto the garage, that garage will have to be taken down. However, with our build pocket and what I mentioned before, it's quite possible you can build beside your garage. So doesn't mean your garage needs to come down. If you have enough room, you can actually
What
leave
about
your
the
garage.
cement pad?
Cement pad too, yeah,
You'd have
that,
to-
yeah,
you'd
that's
have to
your,
tear
that's
that
your
up.
foundation, right? So we have to be able to put the screw piles down, and we have to be able to connect to utilities, so we have to excavate to get to utilities. And generally, the older garages, the cement pad isn't in good shape, right? You know, a brand new house, you know, all these big cracks and all that sort of stuff. So like I said, 9 times, I haven't run into a situation where we've been able to keep the garage. So I would just say, no, you're not gonna keep your garage if you're building there. But yeah, you also have the ability to have a garage and a backyard house if you have the room. Do we have to give up our garage parking? And what's the requirement for parking? So the new bylaws specify that there are no more parking requirements. It used to be 1 spot per unit. That's no longer the case. So you can build a unit, you can build a home with no garage. You can build a home with no designated parking if you'd like. Also, in our 2-story example, if you wanted the garage to be for the main dwelling and just had the unit without the garage, access to the garage, that's possible too. A lot of times we're having people divide it in half, so they have a single car garage for the main dwelling, a single car garage for the garden suite. Ultimately, it's just personal preference, and it's also, of course, based on crunching the numbers as far as rental amounts you can receive, that sort of thing. But there is no formal requirement for parking anymore. And what if my neighbors complain? Short answer, maybe not in Highlands, but it's great. Short answer is they will, most likely, right? But you're acting within the bylaws, so you know I've seen people say, well, I don't want to build a 2-story because I'm worried about my neighbor, and that's nice, but technically you could build a 1-story and then the next year your neighbor could build a 2-story. You know what I mean? So that they have the ability to do the same things as you. So you know, will they be disgruntled? Quite possibly. You know, it is change in a neighborhood, and you can make your best efforts, obviously, to not inconvenience neighbors and that sort of thing. But ultimately, as long as you're within the bylaws, there's nothing the neighbors can do to affect your decisions. That's it. Any questions?
Any questions for Adam?
Yeah, go ahead.
2. So what's the average cost of building the two double car garage with the thing on top of the elevator?
Yeah, so double car garage with an elevator, you're somewhere around 325,000. So as far as return on investment goes, so if it is just a pure rental, we're actually not recommending that model. The return on investment is much better on a 1-story. So a 2-story with an elevator is approximately, say, 30% more, but you're not necessarily going to get that much more in rent. So the 2-story with the double car garage and maybe a hobby space or flex space on the main floor is great more for multi-generational living, personal use. As far as the return on investment,
Is there funding for that, multi-generational use?
there's no funding, but there is a tax credit. There's the multi-generational tax credit with the federal government. At a max amount, we can claim about 50,000 of the build cost off your income, up to a maximum, I think, of $7,500. So it's something. So there is a multi-generational tax credit, but other than that, there is no formal funding.
And the funding, if you're renting, is different, or that's the same as multi-generational?
No, technically, if you're building it for a rental, by the word of the document, you don't qualify for the multi-generational. Like, it's supposed to be for a family member, right? So if you're building an inclusive unit as a rental, you wouldn't qualify for the tax credit. I mean, maybe your accountant could make something work there, but technically, by the way it's worded, you would not qualify for that tax credit.
So you're looking at, if you built a single story, well, 200,000 with a double, 325-ish.
Yeah, so single story is somewhere around 245, and it obviously it all depends on the size of it, right? And then a 3-story, you're sort of 325, 330, and around there. Obviously, like I said, depends on the size and the finishes. There's so many different things.
Does that 245 include demolition of everything that's there and the whole process? Or is
Yeah,
that
and I'm ballparking here.
I know, I
Nobody
understand.
hold me to anything.
But I'm just thinking about ROI, because you have to now consider that the property is gonna be valued that much higher, your property taxes are gonna go up.
That's right.
You were talking about short-term rentals.
Yeah.
would concern me more on the liability to the property owner, because if I have a long-term rental, I would have beholden upon the tenant to have a full suite of insurance covering me. But if I have people on 3 to 6 months coming out of the Glenrose example that you used, that would concern me more. So I do have a big lot here in Highlands. I'm interested in, the other thought I have is if you're financing this and you're 65 years old, still working, but not gonna be working a whole lot longer, have equity but not necessarily years of income, how does that all work? So it's very interesting concept, but
Yeah, so that's, I keep harping on how every situation is different. So the idea is that we never want you to build a unit and then wish you hadn't, even if it's a beautiful, and it will be, a beautiful unit, right? So a lot of that is looking at the financing model. So how are you financing it? What are your holding costs? What is your property tax increase? Insurance, and short-term rentals, you would expect that you would be able to rent it for a larger amount, right? So there's gonna be, there's a cost benefit analysis that we would go through. Again, it's based on, so you might look at the whole thing and say, you know what? It doesn't work this way, so you're either gonna adjust the project or you're gonna adjust the financing model, right? So that's part of it. In the end, we need you to make passive income or the program.
well, I'm thinking I could move into the suite and rent the main house.
Of course, yeah, and that's we're encouraging that too.
Because I
right?
have a decent house, but it's more than I need for sure.
Exactly. That's for a lot of people. That's perfect. You stay in your neighborhood, right? And like I said, didn't really focus on. Yeah, I didn't really focus on that too much today. But obviously, moving into your backyard and renting out your main suite, whether it's a family solution or just like you said to cover the new costs now. So renting out your main suite if you're mortgage free, renting out the main dwelling can cover and plus any additional costs of the backyard house. So now essentially you have a free inclusive house. Someone else is paying for it, and you've increased the value of your property. So there's a lot of wins there.
How much is the short-term rental tax in Alberta? Because the Treasury Board and Finance created a short-term rental tax it's mostly for Airbnb, right? But if this is considered a short rental property, like short-term, then that tax might apply too. So now you're getting taxed by the province as well for short-term, right?
Right. Well, go ahead. The landlord fellow back there, you can help me. You go ahead.
So the province counts anything that's technically under a month as a short-term rental.
Okay.
Anything that's over a month is a residential tenancy, and that's where the Residential Tenancy Act applies. And there is no tax, there's no GST when you are a landlord and you're charging rent.
Okay.
But if you are using a short-term, you can even do a week-to-week rental and things like that, and that's under the Residential Tenancy Act as well. No taxes in that. But if you are operating like Airbnb, such as under the Innkeepers Act, that's where the tourism tax comes in, because that's what they charge the hotels to stay there.
Okay, thank you.
And my second question is the other half of this. You talked about, maybe renting to people with disabilities or whatever.
Sure.
How is that potential person with barriers, whatever those are, supported? Because people all over this country have done this and have had their suites ruined, and whether it's addictions or mental health or disabilities, and the key to this, if you're doing something that is for other types of, I know you're showing very nice young lady in a wheelchair, but if you're renting to other people with issues, barrier issues, how are they supported to be successfully housed, that they can be successful and the landlord is not providing the supports to this person, or the landlord's property is somehow protected? I know we talked about insurance and stuff, but there are news stories about all these people getting housed and ruining the housing.
Right.
Because supports have fallen through the cracks.
Well, and that's why our
I don't know if that's your department, I can't.
No, that's a great
in,
question.
But you talked about
so
supports.
it just like any other property management company, obviously there's checks and balances. You're checking references. You're not just throwing somebody in because they have them, So and the homeowners yourselves, the property owners, still have a right of refusal, right? So we could say this person is interested. we've checked their references, so you still have a right of refusal there, and obviously there's no guarantees. But the tenants are found not on a sort of a Kijiji ad. The tenants are found, so we have tenant placement partners, like I said, so Spinal Cord Injury Alberta, the Glen Rose, these different agencies. So they're recommending someone that's in their system. So these foundations are designed to support those people and the success of those people. So there is a group behind them, right? That's working for their well-being. Again, there are no guarantees, right?
It's typically once they graduate from the program, the support's not being necessarily there.
Right, yeah, so I guess I'm talking about sort of early stages as far as like, recently injured perhaps. But yeah, so it's not just, oh, you have a mobility challenge, you're in. There's obviously still a vetting process, right? And working with the not-for-profits to make sure that person is supported. For the sake of the program, we want a very successful integration and long-term viability, right? So us, the builders, the Nolan's Collective, Spinal Cord Injury Alberta, we all want this to work, right? So we're all sort of working towards a successful situation, which is a property owner making passive income in a low-risk situation.
So is the No Limits Collective a society, public nonprofit, private nonprofit corporation?
Nope, the No Limits Collective is a for-profit.
Okay.
It's a private company. It's privately owned by myself, full disclosure. What we're providing is at no cost, right? But we are looking to find funding models. We're just like everybody else. We're looking to make a profit, and that's okay. So I'm a big believer that inclusive and accessible housing doesn't have to be a charity. I mean, Savita is great. I'm not throwing shade at them, but it's okay. It's okay to make a profit. There is a demand, right? So there's a demand but no supply. So let's get in there.
So then the No Limits Collective signs the rental agreement for the garden suite
That's right.
and then sublets that to a applicant from your referral sources.
That's right.
So then the No Limits Collective actually takes on the liability of that garden suite for that sublet.
For the first year, yeah.
But then what happens after that first year?
It's after the first year. It's assumed that the tenant would assume that lease.
So then your rental agreement is a 12-month fixed term lease,
That's right.
and then the property owner would then sign an ongoing
That's right.
tenancy agreement with the tenant. Okay.
Yeah, with No Limits Collective, continuing to be active with the property as far as ensuring what that does is it just gives, like I said, for that first year, it gives the investor that guarantee. They know exactly how much they're gonna rent it for. They know they're renting it from day one. Even if it's not vacant for that first year, you're guaranteed that rental amount. And then after that, whatever tenant is placed there, they would be sort of an ongoing thing with that tenant.